My name is Catherine DeValier, and I am doing this video for my EDU 585 class on ESL Leadership through Georgetown College under the direction of Dr. Westerland. The topic we're going to discuss today is how to assist ESL students in a school system, especially when teachers are not aware of what to do or may not be aware of certain aspects and methods to use. The first question that I will throw out to educators: what do you know about ESL programs? What do you know about proficiency levels? How do you teach ESL students? In order to become a culturally responsive educator, there are certain things that you have to be aware of. Number one, you have to respect your students' diversity, respect their culture, respect who they are. You have to understand their culture as well. There might be certain things that may limit their ability to adjust to schools here in the U.S. and into your classroom. You need to be able to sustain high expectations. The only thing that they have is that they have a limited English language proficiency. It does not mean that they don't have the knowledge in other classes, mathematics or history or science. They may just not be able to express it in English, but they may have it in their own native language. And the other thing to be aware of is to gain parent and community support. When you are accepting of cultural differences, it makes students more relaxed, especially when they see that you are accepting of their culture. They do better in a classroom setting. So I asked about ESL programs, and so we're going to discuss a little bit about that. First thing is the way ESL programs are set up. My school in particular, we do not have any major ESL program, although we do follow all guidelines that are set up by the state of Kentucky. First of all, the steps to identifying students who are possible ESL students. First thing we use is a home language survey. The home language survey helps us find out if students speak another language at home, if that's their primary language. When those are returned, then a school can set up a screener test, usually a screener test such as a WAPT through WIDA, and that will come back and give scores to see the proficiency level of a student. When those do come back, then usually a student's PSP can be set up, a PSP plan, and so the PSP plan will give any modifications for teachers. If you look at modifications, just simple modifications sometimes, such as having a dictionary, bilingual dictionary for a student to use in a classroom, or in some cases, some textbooks already come in bilingual. We have some in our school that we can use, such as science or math books, history books, and it will help students in addition to learning their English, but it also gives them the information of the program to help them out if there are no ESL special services specifically available, if there's no ESL certified teachers in the district, in your school district. Now, with regards to the proficiency levels, WIDA has set up proficiency levels, and I have a chart here that I'm going to show for understanding, starting with the bottom. I don't know if you can see this, but we start at an entering, and we move up: entering, emerging, developing, expanding, bridging, and reaching. These are the proficiency levels, the English language proficiency levels. WIDA standards give us, and so those can help you see how a student progresses through their English learning. They start at the entering, in which they may only be able to use graphs, pictures, words, maybe just certain directions, commands, yes or no questions in the class. They move into merging, in which they might be able to use phrases or short sentences. Developing, they are able to expand on those short sentences. Written paragraphs may be a little longer. Expanding, of course, they can use more sentence structure. They can possibly do a little bit more discourse with oral language. Bridging is the number 5 on the list. So as we move up, now they can become a little bit more proficient with their peers, with their students, with their other classmates, I should say. And then you have reaching, in which communication is very good, in which they can now communicate with their peers in English. So those are the definitions of the different WEDA standards, ELD standards, English Language Development Standards. And so from there, a student, once they reach that proficiency level, then they can exit the program. They are tested with an access test, and so once that proficiency level is met, they're considered exited. They are still watched and monitored for 2 years. If a teacher would notice that they're not doing very well or not progressing, they can re-enter the program, an ESL program, and continue to try to better that English language. Now, with regards to there's also some can-do statements that go along with those levels. And so I have another kind of chart here. And these are all found on the WEDA website. You have, for each one of these levels, we have a domain. And those domains are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And so it gives you some examples of what the learner can do at these different levels, okay, with those different domains. And so things such as naming the objects when they're speaking, or if they're listening, maybe just matching oral statements. So various things that you can look at with regards to your student, knowing exactly how to help them. Now, with regards to that, we have some different methods that can be used when teaching ESL students. Those, how to better provide for them. Avoid using lectures, avoid using interviewing, oral reports. Try to use maps, try to use graphs, charts. Include those in your classroom for those ESL students. Pictures, especially if they are at a entering level, it's harder for them to understand and follow along sometimes with the lecture. If you are assessing their listening comprehension skills, take some time to talk with them. Also, get to know them, get to know their educational background, life experience. Adjust your instruction to include something that may be familiar to them in their instruction. Let them know that you value their culture. You can always assess their background knowledge so that you can fill in the gaps with your own lesson plans. Assume that they don't have the same experience in their country as they have here in the United States in American schools. So that is another thing that you need to make sure that you are aware of when providing for them for their education. We discussed different plans, and so I want to discuss some of the plans specifically for recommendations for my school. Recommendations I have three main recommendations for my school with regards to the ESL program. First, with regards to having signs, posters in our building, we don't have many. We usually don't have many ESL students in our building at all. Very few, maybe one or two, if that, every other year or every year. But signs could be created by, depending upon what the home language survey would come up with as the major languages spoken by families that are coming into our school district, to have, if possible, the world language classes create some of those signs. Some of the upper level students create signs in, if it was to be Spanish, some signs of some of the policies or procedures, or letters to help out and make them part of the cultural exchange there with regards to being culturally responsive, and the school as well. Another recommendation is to have some of the staff and teachers learn a little bit of the language, maybe the main language, if that's Spanish, then learn some greetings and learn some simple conversations, so that when people come into the office or call, they can feel a little bit more at ease with the staff trying to communicate with them. It allows for them to see that, yes, that the school does try to communicate and is doing their best, and making that effort, putting forth that effort to communicate with them and become culturally responsive. Another thing would be to set up, of course, PD, so that educators, staff can understand what it is that is needed to teach students who are ESL students coming from their countries into the United States to a U.S. American school. And so these are the different recommendations that I have for my school, and so I hope that they will be helpful. Now, when with regards to assessing students, alternative assessments work very well. Allow students to demonstrate their knowledge in a different format, so depending upon their proficiency levels. So maybe just labeling a picture or diagram, or drawing a picture that demonstrates a key idea that they've learned. Explaining an idea orally, or maybe answering questions orally could help. Submitting a project, hands-on project activity instead of a class test can also help. I do hope that this information can help and give ideas to educators who are looking for answers to what do I do with a ESL student in my classroom, and how do I better assist them in their learning. And so I hope that this was very helpful.